my name is Sonya Madison, and welcome to Law Unfiltered, where I talk about various current events and some of the legal implications. So there are two topics that I want to discuss today. The first is dealing with an inmate in Tennessee that is suing the sheriff for prohibiting her essentially from being able to have an abortion. And the second is the recent Attorney General sessions with Mr. Sessions. Interesting enough. So anyways, let's start with the first one. So in Tennessee, there was a federal lawsuit that was filed, and it was essentially saying from this Tennessee inmate that because she was incarcerated, she had just been arrested, she wasn't convicted, but while she was arrested, she was unable to get an abortion. And her allegations are essentially saying that the sheriff would not even permit her to go back and forth using the transportation, as well as wouldn't pay for the procedure. Now the sheriff is countering, saying, no, that's not what happened. I just wouldn't permit you to use taxpayers' money to go back and forth to the procedure, as well as to pay for the procedure itself. But if you wanted to pay for it or reimburse the taxpayers for the transportation as well as the actual procedure, then he was going to permit her to do so. So what's interesting is now that this case has already been, or a similar case had already been brought to the Supreme Court. And there you had an Arizona inmate who said that she pretty much voluntarily was able to provide for the expenses for the transportation as well as the procedure itself, but the sheriff at that time refused to let her again seek the abortion. Now in that case, the Supreme Court refused to hear the case, so it went back to the lower court, and the lower court did hold that it was unconstitutional, the violation of her 8th and 14th Amendment rights, to prevent her from being able to get an abortion. And the circuit court or the appellate court in that case also emphasized that she was willing to expense on her own dime the expenses for the transportation as well as for the procedure, but the sheriff refused to do so. So in this case, again, the distinction is going to be whether or not it is going to be something the taxpayer should have to fit the bill for if she wants to seek an abortion. Now, I don't think that it is something that the taxpayer should pay for. I think everyone has a divisive issue or a divisive reasoning as it pertains to abortion. And in this situation, if she was willing to split the bill, then I think it would have been unconstitutional for the sheriff to deny her. But since he is claiming, no, listen, I would have permitted her to use the transportation as well as to be able to have the procedure if she was going to expense it herself, then I think that definitely brings up a different issue. But you have a lot of ACLU and other women's rights groups that are pretty much saying that it should be something that the taxpayer should pay for. And if it's, some of them probably say in the long run, here you're going to have a child that is born either into a system anyway, so the government will at some point split that bill. But nonetheless, I do think given the way the administration is now very conservative, it will probably fall on, if it were to go to the Supreme Court, fall on the side of permitting someone to have the abortion if they are able to expense the resources. Now this is interesting because it kind of tells into the Planned Parenthood aspect of it. And recently, both the House and the Congress have pretty much elected or voted legislation to defund Planned Parenthood, and specifically they are going to say at least $450 million that is usually allocated for Planned Parenthood and some of its affiliates would no longer be there for them. And they describe affiliates to be any organization that, again, has the opportunity or does services pertaining to abortions. Now, I don't think this would be a good idea because, again, Planned Parenthood does so much more than just abortion, and it's a huge asset for a lot of women, particularly women in poor economic status, to be able to obtain various services, health related, as well as to be able to have a baby to full term, if that is something that they're elected to do. And so to defund the organization for one aspect of their service when it's already established that they cannot use federal funds to do the abortions, or they cannot collect Medicaid funds to perform abortions, that I think here we're having just one of those, the fact that I want to make this stance, abortion should not be something that is pretty much intolerable. It's pretty much a anti or pro-life stance. So going into the next topic of the Attorney General, now recently with the election of soon-to-be President or President-elect Trump, he decided that he wanted to appoint Jeff Sessions as his Attorney General. Now, as you guys, the listeners know, Attorney General is the highest lawyer that you can be in the federal government. You're pretty much overseeing all the laws, particularly the federal laws, and you're also helping states enforce some of the federal laws when such states are asking you to come in and assist. And so given his background of being, as some would call, particularly Cory Booker, will call a racist, or will call pretty much someone insensitive to minorities as well as immigrants and the like, a lot of people are denouncing or saying that this is not the appropriate appointment for that position. Now, I think if Donald Trump really wants to come off as a president that is more inclusive, or at least more considerable of various ideas and backgrounds, then this probably isn't the best appointment. I mean, his background has showed he's not really interested in the federal sentencing guidelines, and a lot of those guidelines do adversely impact minorities and immigrants more so than in other statutes. When you talk about marijuana versus cocaine, African Americans and other minority groups are largely impacted by those sentencing guidelines versus other drugs. He also is not for a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement, and he's very pro, let's make sure the police are protected. I'm not going to do a lot of inserting myself when it comes to various racial issues at various police departments. He even went as far as to say if one officer does act in racial animus, he's not going to, or he doesn't support a lawsuit against the entire department. So he's pretty much had this drawn out line that's pretty much like, whatever the law is, I'm just going to stick to the law. I'm not interested in the implications or the effect that law has on some people. And again, as if President or President-elect Trump wants to come off as a president that is going to be a little bit more inclusive, or at least mindful that a lot of times some of these laws, particularly, for example, the voting rights law, were enacted in a way to protect individuals, but now we're pretty much getting rid of it, or these federal sentencing guidelines that have an adverse impact on a certain group. If we're going to ignore those adverse impacts just to go by the red letter of the law, then that's definitely going to cause even more divisiveness in our country. So let me know what you guys think. I definitely want to hear what you guys, again, think about the abortion, Planned Parenthood, as well as the Attorney General. And in the meantime, thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next time on Law Unfiltered.